From Seo Taiji to Boa, the stage belonged to many. But once in a while, someone comes along who changes the rules entirely. He turned style into art, rebellion into culture, and self-expression into the new standard. To understand the boundless potential of K-pop today, you have to start with the man who redefined greatness itself, G-Dragon. A music show stage in Seoul. 5 boys stand in formation, waiting for their cue. Big Bang had debuted a year earlier to modest reception. Their first single underperformed. Industry veterans were already predicting they'd fade like countless groups before them. And YG's whole plan to focus on hip-hop was a mistake that no one would remember. Then, the opening synth of Lies cuts through the studio. 7-note sequence. That's all it took. The melody was haunting, minimal, nothing like the overproduced pop dominating Korean television. Standing center, an 18-year-old with blonde hair and eyeliner held the camera's gaze. Kwon Ji Yong. Stage name, G-Dragon. He wrote the song, produced it, arranged every note. Lies rapidly ascended to the #1 spot, dominating the charts for a record-breaking 6 consecutive weeks. Music show awards piled up. But mere statistics couldn't capture the true seismic shift. Across South Korea, music listeners and aspiring artists began meticulously checking the album credits. The question on everyone's mind was, who wrote this? Who produced it? And the answer, the name G-Dragon, appeared time and time again, marking a new era of self-producing idols. Before Lies, idols were largely performers of material provided by others. After Lies, they could be creators. The song not only launched Big Bang into stardom, instead it cracked open the question the K-pop industry had been avoiding at that time. What if idols could create their own music and still dominate? By the time Haru Haru dropped in 2008, the answer was clear. Another #1 hit, this one staying atop the charts for 7 consecutive weeks. Another G-Dragon composition. The pattern was forming, but the system wasn't ready to celebrate him yet. Success on your own terms always comes with resistance, and G-Dragon was about to learn that the hard way. Here's what the industry believed in 2009. Idol group members don't go solo and immediately dominate. They go solo, but then prove they needed the group to stay consistent. G-Dragon didn't believe that.
Hey, yo, finally!
Is this what you've been waiting for?
Brand new CD!
I'm all by myself, but it's so good.
His solo debut album Heartbreaker released in August, just before his 21st birthday. The title track opened with a pop-punk energy that K-pop had never fully committed to. The album blended hip-hop, electronic, rock genres that weren't supposed to coexist in a single project, especially not from an idol. The first week, the album moved 50,000 copies. By the end of the year, it had sold over 200,000. It became the best-selling album by a solo artist that year, outselling established veterans and proving that a member of a 3-year-old group could command the same commercial power alone. But the success brought intense scrutiny. Accusations surfaced almost immediately. Plagiarism. Critics claimed tracks like Heartbreaker and Butterfly borrowed too heavily from Florida and Oasis. The backlash spread fast. Music shows debated it. Online forums dissected every beat. G-Dragon responded by defending his creative process. No apologies, no backtracking, just a statement about artistic influence versus theft, and a refusal to let controversy erase the work. Florida's management later confirmed that no plagiarism had occurred, even suggesting a future collaboration. The controversy faded, but the album didn't. It kept selling. The stages kept happening. And by the time the dust settled, the message was clear. Greatness doesn't ask for permission. Heartbreaker proved something the industry didn't want to admit. A solo idol could write, produce, and perform their own vision. The blueprint expanded. Other idols started asking their companies for more creative control. Producers started taking idol composers seriously. The door gdragon had been pushing against finally cracked open, but walking through that door meant going even further. And what came next would show how proving himself as a solo artist was only the beginning of building an empire. By 2012, gdragon had already proven his worth as a solo act. The question now was how far he could stretch the idea of what a K-pop artist could become. One of a Kind dropped in September. The title track, also named One of a Kind, declared his uniqueness over a beat that fused EDM with traditional Korean instruments. A combination that shouldn't have worked but did. The music video featured him in a blonde hair, surrounded by surreal sets and avant-garde fashion. Every frame felt intentional, like he'd directed not just the music, but the entire visual universe around it. The extended play was a showcase of his range, also featuring future hits like the acoustic That XX, the playful hip-hop track Crayon, and Without You, which featured a then-unknown trainee who would later debut as Rosé of Blackpink. The EP topped charts across Asia within days. Sales hit 150,000 units by the end of the month. But the commercial success was almost secondary. What mattered more was the statement that K-pop could be experimental, genre-defying, and still connect with massive audiences. You didn't have to sacrifice artistry for popularity. Then, Coup d'etat arrived in September 2013, and gdragon brought the world into the room. He worked alongside genre-bending producers like Diplo and Bauer. The sheer magnitude of these partnerships proved gdragon was building something massive. The resulting album debuted at #1 in South Korea and charted internationally. This album also featured the track Black, which introduced another future Blackpink member, Kim Jennie, to the public for the first time as a featured artist. The album produced massive hits, but none more iconic than the track Crooked. With its driving pop-punk energy, stadium-ready chorus, and a high-fashion music video filmed in London, Crooked became the album's signature track and a defining song in his solo catalog. The album proved that Korean artists didn't need to abandon their identity to collaborate globally with international artists. The album Coup d'etat debuted at #1 in South Korea and charted internationally on the Billboard World Albums chart. At the 2013 Mnet Asian Music Awards, gdragon walked away with 4 major trophies, including Artist of the Year. Rare for a soloist in an industry built around groups. The award includes recognition and validation that the rules had been rewritten. One person with the right vision and work ethic could command the same cultural weight as any 5-member group. In 2014, he became the first Korean solo artist to win a World Music Award in Monte Carlo, the same stage that had honored Michael Jackson and Madonna. His success transcended matching Western greatness. gdragon proved his artistry set a new global standard. But music was only half the story. What he did next would prove that influence doesn't stop when the song ends. The music charts couldn't contain gdragon's vision. By 2015, he had fully transformed into a global style icon, fundamentally rewriting the rules of fashion in K-pop. Paris Fashion Week, 2015. gdragon sits front row at Chanel, not as a celebrity guest, but as someone Karl Lagerfeld personally invited. The legendary designer would later call him one of the most interesting dressers of his generation. His airport fashion became international news. His Instagram posts set trends across Asia. Business of Fashion named him to the BOF 500, their annual list of people shaping the global fashion industry. Not entertainers wearing clothes well, but artists creating the culture around fashion itself. Time magazine included him on their most influential people online list. Women's Wear Daily named him one of the best-dressed men in the world. Forbes Asia put him on their 30 under 30 list. These were acknowledgments that he had become a force in global culture. In November 2016, he launched Peaceminusone, not a merchandise line, a creative brand. The logo, a daisy with one petal falling, representing beauty in imperfection. The designs blurred the line between streetwear and high fashion. Every piece sold out within hours of release. The brand was as successful as it was influential. Other idols started launching their own fashion lines. Entertainment companies began treating artist branding as seriously as music production. Gdragon had proven that an idol's influence could extend beyond albums and concert tickets into tangible products that carried cultural weight. But influence is only meaningful if it can survive at scale, if it can hold an arena, if it can fill a stadium. And that test was coming. June 2017, an album drops with no traditional promotion, no music show appearances scheduled, no fan meetings announced, just a digital release and a title, Kwon Ji Yong, his birth name. The album was raw, personal. Tracks about loneliness, pressure, the cost of being a public figure for over a decade. The track Bullshit opened with profanity, something K-pop idols simply didn't do. And the other track, Divina Commedia, referenced Dante and existential crisis. This album wasn't made for the charts. He made it as a raw confession, stripping away the Gdragon image to show the person beneath. The industry questioned the experimental format, a USB drive in the physical edition instead of a traditional CD. Minimal promotional cycle, no obvious title track. Critics wondered if he'd miscalculated. Then, the numbers came in. The album topped iTunes charts in 46 countries within 24 hours. It debuted at #1 on Korean charts despite the unconventional release. The Act 3 MOTTE World Tour followed. Act 3 refers to the beginning of the third decade of his life, and MOTTE means Moment of Truth, the end. The tour visited 36 shows across 29 cities, lasting about 4 months. Over 600,000 fans across all dates. Every show was a 2-hour production, live band, elaborate stage design, and costume changes. But the core was always the music. Moments where he stood center stage with just a microphone, holding an arena through presence alone. Pure aura, and thousands of people hanging on every word. The tour proved something the industry had denied. A Korean solo artist could command the same scale as any global act. But in South Korea, even boundless ambition must pause for duty. The law required every able-bodied man to serve, and Gdragon's time had arrived. The 27th of February 2018. Gdragon enlisted for mandatory military service. The announcement was quiet, no farewell concert, no dramatic send-off, just a statement and then silence. For 18 months, he disappeared from public life. No social media updates, no surprise appearances, just absence in an industry that moves at light speed. New groups debuted every month. Trends shifted weekly. Some wondered if his influence would fade in the gap. But the fans believes the silence became part of the legend. His absence made people realize how much space he'd occupied. Music show stages felt different without him. Fashion weeks lacked a certain energy. The industry had grown used to his presence, and now it had to remember how to function without it. He returned in October 2019, quieter than before. No rush to release music, no immediate comeback announcements. Just a gradual re-entry into the world he'd helped build. The restraint was intentional. After a decade of constant output, he was choosing when and how to create. But the world had changed while he was gone. A new generation of K-pop had risen. Acts that had grown up watching him were now topping global charts. And what happened next would prove whether his influence had shaped them or whether they'd moved past him entirely. While gdragon was away, K-pop went global in ways even he hadn't predicted. Blackpink headlined Coachella. BTS topped the Billboard Hot 100. Stray Kids and TXT debuted with creative control from day one. The industry he'd fought to change had transformed completely. And in interview after interview, when these artists were asked who influenced them, the same name kept coming up. BTS members spoke about studying his production techniques. Blackpink's members trained in the same building where he'd once practiced. Younger groups cited him as proof that idols could be more than performers, to be artists in their own right. His vision became the new standard for the next wave of idols. By 2023, a new generation of self-producing idols had emerged. Groups debuted with members already credited as writers and composers. Companies marketed creative control as a selling point. The industry had fully accepted what gdragon had been arguing since 2009. Idols with artistic vision were more compelling than idols following instructions. His fashion line, Peaceminusone, continued to grow. The brand had become as influential as his music, proving that his impact extended beyond discography into tangible culture. But influence is meaningless if it can't evolve. If it just becomes nostalgia for what was. In 2025, the Übermensch concert film released theatrically in nearly 70 countries. A cinematic experience. The response was immediate. Fans who'd followed him for 2 decades sat next to teenagers discovering him for the first time. The 2025 World Tour finale took place at Gochok Skydome. Tickets sold out before the official sale date. The show opened with a medley of his earliest hits, then moved through every era chronologically. Each song met with the same thunderous response, regardless of when it was released. That's the proof of legacy, whether old work still resonates when placed next to new. In November, he performed at the APEC 2025 Gala in Seoul, world leaders in attendance. The performance transcended mere entertainment. It became an act of cultural diplomacy. A Korean artist representing his nation's creative power on a global political stage. The boy who once fought for creative freedom was now a symbol of Korean culture itself. Later that month, he sat down with journalist Son Suk-hee. 10 years since their last interview, the questions had changed. Not about his next song, but about his place in history, about what he built, about what comes after influence becomes standard. The answers were measured. Thoughtful. The hunger from his 20s had transformed into something steadier. He spoke about the younger generation not with competition, but with pride. They were expanding what he'd started, taking it further than he'd imagined. That's what legacy looks like when it's working. 20 years ago, K-pop had one definition of success. Follow the system, perfect the choreography, sing the songs you're given, smile when told. Greatness meant conformity. gdragon destroyed that definition. He proved idols could write and produce and still dominate charts. He proved solo artists could fill stadiums without a group influence. He proved fashion and music could be equally important forms of expression. He proved Korean artists didn't need to apologize for ambition or artistry, but what matters most is what he made possible. Modern K-pop idols self-produce because he showed it was viable. They launch fashion brands because he proved it could work. They speak openly about creative struggles because he normalized vulnerability. They collaborate globally because he opened those doors. BTS, Blackpink, Stray Kids, ATEEZ, TXT, Rise. Groups that didn't exist when he debuted now operate on principles he fought to establish. They don't copy him. They don't need to. but he had changed the foundation they're building on. That's the difference between success and influence. Success is personal. Influence is generational. Gdragon changed what winning looks like. The stage that once demanded conformity now celebrates individuality. The industry that once punished experimentation now rewards it. The system that once controlled artists now negotiates with them. And that transformation traces back to one name, Kwon Ji Yong. Gdragon, the artist who refused to be anything other than himself, and in doing so, gave an entire generation permission to do the same. Gdragon dared to be bold. Will you?